we have just crossed the planet and now are in Dallas, Texas. So we welcome AJ to 24 Hours of UX. If you're just joining, this is really a global festival of UX over a 24-hour span with upwards of 20 different cities involved. It's a group effort. Peter and I are co-organizing it out of Geneva, Switzerland, but we're collaborating with, as I mentioned, many cities and groups, all grassroots from across the planet. And so this has been put together relatively quickly, but not without some help. And I wanted to acknowledge some of those sponsors because they've really helped make this possible. Adobe is one of those, and AJ works for Adobe, so he's going to be talking about Adobe products and solutions, which will be really nice. And UX Testing is another lead sponsor. Big Design Events, also I believe out of Dallas, if I'm not mistaken. And then Whitespace and Holistic here in Geneva. So as a group, we've collaborated to finance this, to bring you this event free of charge. If you see, we're consistently at over 1,000 people watching concurrently across the planet. It's just been steady. It's been rock steady at that. And we have upwards of let me just check real quick, AJ. I won't take too much more of your time. 6,413 people who have subscribed today. So, and I think the number will just keep going up as we move over into the US. So we're beginning to transition to North America. Welcome aboard, AJ. I'm gonna turn it over to you and the floor is yours. I'm here in the background, so I won't be going away entirely, but go for it. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jesse. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you joining this live session here at 24 Hours UX. My name's AJ Wood. As Jesse mentioned, I am an Adobe employee. I currently work as a solutions consultant, which means I get to be working directly with our customers, showing them some of our solutions. So this morning, I'm going to talk about Adobe XD, and I'll go ahead and mute my camera and share my screen so we can get started. I wanted to start by providing you some resources. So go ahead, take a screen capture of this slide. I will be sure to bring it up again at the end of my presentation. I'm going to show you a couple of these links, but what I have for you this morning are both resources for Adobe XD as well as resources for Creative Cloud, which Adobe XD is part of. And then certainly there at the bottom, I'm on LinkedIn and all the social, so would love to connect with anyone who's here today. Let's talk about those resources very quickly. First and foremost, from now until October, if you are using Adobe XD, including the free starter kit for Adobe XD, we Adobe are providing you unlimited sharing and collaboration. So from now until October, regardless of which plan you happen to have with Adobe XD, from the free starter kit all the way to your existing plan, professional plan, you can do unlimited sharing and collaboration. So I provided that link. You can check out that article and go ahead and start sharing your prototypes today. The next resource that's here for you, again, a free resource, is Let's XD, which is actually created by our senior product evangelist, XD evangelist, Howard Pinsky. So this website has not only tutorials for you, but most importantly, lots and lots of downloadable free UI kits. So if you want to play around with XD files as you learn XD, this is a great free resource for you. Lots of video tutorials, written tutorials, and access to all XD. As we look at the platform that is Creative Cloud, Adobe XD, of course, is a premier application that's part of our Creative Cloud platform. If you use other Adobe apps. If you tell me, hey, I love Photoshop and I use Illustrator and I'm a video person, I provide for you this article that talks about what's new in Creative Cloud and why it's relevant for those of you attending today. I maintain this article. So if you want to know, hey, what's new in XD, you can view this article, click Adobe XD, and it'll take you to the feature timeline for that product. If you say, hey, I need to know what's going on with Photoshop or Photoshop for iPad, you can click the link in that article. It's going to take you to the feature release timeline for those products. As Adobe adds new applications, I update this article. If the permanent links on adobe.com change, I update this article. So it's a great one-stop resource for you, all things related to your Creative Cloud desktop apps. I have also created a secondary article that links to all the Learning Center tutorials. So if you say, hey, all those XD resources are awesome, do you have anything similar for Photoshop? Of course we do. If I click the link for Photoshop, it's going to bring me to the Creative Cloud Learning Center for Photoshop. You can see there's beginner experience. You can see it's designed and laid out by what you want to do or what category of creative you are. So again, as we add new applications, I update this article. As they change the permanent links from time to time, I make sure to keep this current for you. So those are just some additional resources. Again, I'll pop up that resource slide at the end of the presentation. So don't worry about trying to feverishly screen capture stuff right now. We're going to spend the next 50 minutes or so talking about Adobe XD. So I wanted to start by giving you a tour of the application so that we can jump into some cool things like components. So I'm just going to open a file. And the first thing I want to point out, if you're new to Adobe applications or a seasoned veteran, what you will notice in contrast to, say, Premiere or Photoshop or Illustrator is that the user interface is very minimal. So yes, our tools are located on the left-hand side. As I hover over tools, I will get a tool tip that tells me what the keyboard shortcut is, what that tool is. Of course, you would expect as you move between your Adobe apps, some of the keyboard shortcuts should be similar. So Z for the zoom tool, P for the pen tool, etc. You'll notice over on the right-hand side, there is our properties panel, which at the moment is grayed out. And then I have a series of icons down in the lower left corner. If I take you to the window menu, you will notice there is not a list of panels. So unlike Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, all of our Creative Cloud apps, there's not a list of panels here. This is a very minimal user interface. And in fact, we'll take a look at a couple things. First, I'm going to grab my selection tool, okay, which is V for victory. I'm going to select something. And as we take a look, nothing is selected. We look to the right, the properties panel is grayed out. If I take my cursor and I click on the name of an artboard, this one here is home. When I click on its name, notice the property inspector lights up. These are all the properties of that artboard. So its width and height, its position on the stage, whether or not it's using responsive resize, its background color and appearance. If I take my cursor and start selecting objects within that artboard, again, the properties inspector changes to let me know the exact properties of that object. So whether I'm selecting a shape or text, my properties inspector to the right-hand side is going to show me the attributes of that selected item. So I don't have to remember, hey, open the character panel, open my object panel, find the appearance panel. Just select what you want to work with, look to the right, and those are the changes that you can make. Now, other aspects of the user interface as we navigate around, you saw all the tools that are on the upper left-hand side. Down at the bottom are 3 icons. The first icon opens the Assets panel. So this rocks open and closed on the left-hand side. Assets are where you'll find your global colors, your global character styles, or the components that we will discuss today. Underneath the Assets panel is the button for the Layers panel. So in this case, with nothing selected, you can see a list of all my artboards. If I click on a particular artboard and I select something within the artboard, you'll see the Layers panel shows me from a hierarchy standpoint. I'm looking at the home artboard, and these are all the objects within. I can select items from the Layers panel directly to make sure that they're selected on the artboard, or I can click an object on the artboard and then verify it's selected within the Layers panel. Last but not least, in the lower left-hand corner is our plugins manager. Adobe XD has several plugins being developed by folks such as yourselves in the community. Many of those plugins are free. If you want to install plugins directly from XD, you can click Discover Plugins, you can browse, you can take a look, you can do searches, and then you can immediately add those and see how they work for you. So let's talk about some features inside of XD. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and just as a little bit of review, let's talk about some items that you should be familiar with just to get you acclimated to the environment. So I want you to see that I have this longer artboard selected. I'm going to zoom in so we can see a couple artboards side by side. And you can see from the looks of these artboards, they appear to be for some sort of smartphone. And in fact, if I go to preview, I can select any artboard, and over on the top right-hand corner is my desktop preview button. It looks like a play button. And if I turn on desktop preview, I will get a desktop preview window. Now, this particular XD document has not been wired up for interactivity, but I can select artboards directly, and notice as I select them, my preview window changes. And in fact, when I select the longer artboard, it actually shows that artboard letterboxed because it happens to be taller than everything else. I want to point out that this desktop preview window does have a record button. So if you had created a prototype and you wanted to share it with somebody else and provide them a visual walkthrough, you could actually record your desktop preview and then navigate through the application and provide narration for that. But let's go back to the fact that this longer artboard is letterboxed. That, of course, is not the experience that we're looking for. This artboard is intended to scroll. So a little known feature, and one that's often overlooked, is a setting of the artboard. So remember, if I select the artboard by name, I can see the properties of the artboard, and the property that I'm looking for is vertical scrolling. So this artboard should scroll. It should have a view beneath the fold that I want to replicate and show in the preview. So if I turn vertical scrolling on, and I'm just going to put an arbitrary value inside this viewport field. If you look closely, and I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see, I actually have a controller right on the artboard that I can drag up and down and change the viewport height. So if I make this short, I'm going to just cut this off right at the image, and we'll take a look at the preview. You can see now it scrolls within that window. So I could drag this down and put this just above the fold, I actually can see a value as I'm dragging this. It's right there in the center. If you know the value, and I do because I know the height of all my artboards, I can go right into my properties panel and type that value in. Once I have made this scrolling, when I show you the preview again, you'll see as I select different artboards, now it's not letterboxed. And as I scroll, I get the intended effect. And in fact, I can make this longer. I'll zoom out a little bit to make the artboard taller. And if I wanted to replicate this group, I could copy it, right? We could do a copy and a paste, and I can make a duplicate. If you're a longtime creative in Adobe products, you know you could do an Option or an Alt drag and make a duplicate. But we're in XD, and we're going to, again, use a property that's over to the right. Simply select that group, click on Repeat Grid, and now I can drag out duplicates very easily, whether it be vertically or horizontally. I can scroll out a little bit and very quickly replicate this, and I could even change the spread between those items. If I decide I want to change the images, that's very simple to do. I can open up Creative Cloud Libraries. So in XD, remember, it's not located under panels. We don't have panels in XD. So I'm just going to go to File and then open Creative Cloud Libraries. Creative Cloud Libraries is a service that's part of the platform. So these colors could have been created in Illustrator. The images could have been added from Photoshop. Notice I didn't go to those applications first. I don't have those applications open. It allows me to come in and select the items that I want. So I'm going to change real quick to a different library. Let's try this one. And I can come in and select these different foods, and I can just drag them and drop them into my repeat grid, and instantly I propagated all those foods. Likewise, if I had a text file or a spreadsheet, I could select all of my text properties and change those out right away. So by having access to Creative Cloud Libraries, whether I'm a single designer using multiple Adobe apps, or I'm working collaboratively with a team, we now have a single repository where we can place elements and everybody across our applications can use them. So let's take a look at some other items. Let's talk a little bit about components. I'm going to zoom so that you can see this is an example of a component. I know that it's a component because its outline is green and the left corner is not round, it is actually a diamond. If I look to the right in my properties panel, it tells me it's a component, and it also tells me this is an instance of a component. So when I create a component, it becomes a master, and every time I make a duplicate of it, that's an instance of that component. So a couple tips for you. First and foremost, if I wanted to really see the master component, I can right-click, bring up my context menu, and say, hey, I need to edit the master component. I don't know where it is. I'll select it from the menu, and it takes me directly to that master component within my document. This component I created this morning just happens to be floating in space. If I zoom out, you can see it's not on any artboard. It is literally just out in the middle of space. I know that this is the master component. It's identified a couple ways. Number one, the diamond is solid. So at a glance, when I view it, I see the outline is green, which makes me realize it's a component, not an object. And it's a master component because the diamond is solid. If I look to the right in my properties panel, I can see that it's the master component because it's identified as such. Something else you might want to do is view that component in the assets panel. If I right click on it, this is another tip for you. You'll see when I right click now, there's no selection for edit master component because this is that master, but it also doesn't say anything about the assets panel other than adding a color. So I'm going to open the assets panel. And you can see I have a long list of components. I want to find this one. Here is your tip. With the assets panel open, now if I right click on any component or instance, it will show me the item, reveal the component in assets. So you're only going to see this particular menu option if the assets panel is already open. So I'll go ahead and say reveal that component in assets. Now it's highlighted. It has a generic name because I just created it. So I'll just double click on that and I can rename it. Okay, and call this guide icon. So let's talk a little bit more about master components and instances and why they're so useful for us. I'm going to go ahead and open a separate document. All right, I have a blank artboard, and I'm going to take a moment and a second, and I'm going to create a button. So very simple. I'm just going to grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to create a very simple button. I'm going to zoom in so we can see it better. And I'm just going to add text to this button and add some properties, right? So first thing I'll do is I'll remove the border. I'm going to change the fill. And then I'm going to add some text. So here is a very basic button. I'm going to take the two objects, the text and the shape, and I will make these into a component. I can do that by going to Object, Make Component, which is Command K on a Mac or Control K on a PC. I could right click and make this a component, or I could click the plus symbol in the Assets panel to make that object a component. So now that object is a component. I'm going to relabel it. I'm going to call it button. And I know it's my master component because, again, the diamond in the top left corner is solid. So let's go ahead and drag out some instances of this. I'm just going to option drag on that same artboard. And now I have variations. The way that components work, any change to the master component is going to flow to all the instances. So notice as I change the color, all the buttons update. If I want to have variations, if I need to have variations, a good example would be the label. So maybe this text label needs to be something different. Now there's a change. Maybe I want to change the colors. So I'm going to change the color of this particular button. Any updates to a master component flow to all the instances. Except for local overrides. So the local override in this instance for the home button is the color, and its color will not change unless I reset it back to the master state, in which case all of the changes that I made would go away. But in terms of workflow, this allows you to start from the general and work to your specific. Start with everything the same and work towards your exceptions. So I still have the ability to come back here and say, I actually wanted this to be a different shape. And I can modify that. And all my buttons will update. So relegate your overrides of your component instances to those exceptions that are specific to that particular instance, and leave everything else alone, and all your changes will flow. It is possible for you to have nested components. If we take a look at this list of symbols, I have two different symbols here. I'm going to drag them out so that we can see them. Here is my X symbol. Here is my arrow symbol. I could create a button that uses these components. Again, these are instances, they're not the master. So if I make a button, again, a very simple button, I'll remove the border, I'm going to change the color. I'll select this instance. And shrink it. And I can actually select both of these and now make that a component that has a component within it. And again, I could duplicate this. And if I wanted to make a change, notice I can drag from my symbols panel and I can actually do a symbol swap. Okay, so I want you to see, I'm going to pause for a second so everyone can see the screen, look very closely. I have my cursor with that symbol I've just dragged out from the assets panel. It is a plus symbol, which means it'll be added to the artboard. It'll be added to the workspace just like I did previously. But if I hover over an existing symbol, that icon changes. Still have the symbol I dragged out, but no longer a plus symbol. It lets me know that it's going to do a swap. Okay? And then I can size it down, make it fit, okay, within that particular space. So you can swap out your various symbols. You can have nested symbols. Okay? Why else might I want to have components and nested components? For working with your repeat grid. I'm going to zoom in so we can see this repeat grid. When you're working with a repeat grid, you can see if I grab individual items, they all move the same, because in a repeat grid, your object elements are linked together. So as I update them, everything updates. But what if I wanted to have some instances within that repeat grid that were different? What if I had some sort of rating system here? Right? So what if I wanted to show one or more objects? Right? So what I'm going to do is take this balloons component and I'm going to update this repeat grid. So first I'll ungroup the grid and I'm going to add that balloons icon and I'm going to size it down. Grab a different icon real quick. Let's make a shape. Okay, I'm going to take this circle, I'm going to convert it into a component. I'm going to apply a repeat grid to that component. And now it becomes a faux rating. I'm going to select the group. I'm going to turn back on repeat grid. And just like before, I have multiple items. I'm going to change the pictures like I did before from CC Libraries. So here's a couple images. They're swapped out just like they were before. I can change the text. Make a direct change. Because I'm working with a repeat grid, certain elements are uniform. In this case, the label is going to be the same spot because they all move at the same time. But notice here, because I have essentially my component and it's an instance separate within the repeat grid, I could come to this particular instance and effectively make a change to it. I could drill right into that particular item and remove it. So component instances within a repeat grid give me the ability to make variations that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do if I'm just working with object elements. So again, when we work with master components, all of the changes flow to each instance unless there is a local override. At any time, I can right-click an instance and I can reset it to the master state, but that will remove every single change I applied, including any text-specific changes. Let's take a look at some other things that we can do with our components across our document, and let's take a look at colors and character styles. In the Assets panel, in this particular document, there are no components. There's one character style that's part of the document, and notice there are no global colors. I'm going to select this artboard, and I'm going to click the plus symbol in the Assets panel to add all the colors, the solid colors from that artboard, and make them global. So now all of these colors are global colors. And what that means is whether it's text or a symbol or a shape, if it happens to use the global color, when I edit it, it'll change everywhere. So if I make an additional artboard, and I start adding objects, and I start adding shapes and symbols, wherever that color exists, whether it's an applied color, a new object, if I edit a color, I don't have to find it on the artboard. I don't have to scan my document. Wherever that color exists, whether it's a symbol, text, or a shape, whether it's an object or a component, the color will be edited, updated, and changed. This also means, notice that while I created 3 new objects on a brand new artboard, I did not select this text. I did not select this object when I turned around to edit the color. So if you're used to, I define a style, then I select all my objects, and then I apply the style, XD saves you time. If I convert a color to global, every instance is represented within my document. If I make something a global character style, every instance is represented. I don't have to worry about going back and applying it later. Likewise with character styles, if I select a range of text, I can add that as a style. Not only could I change the color, but if I decide I want to change the font, again, with nothing selected, I can right click, I can edit that, change the font to something else, and everything updates. I didn't have to go artboard by artboard. I didn't have to pre-select the items I want to update. I just know that if I go to change those, they'll update everywhere, whether they're standalone elements or they're already part of an existing repeat grid and or component. So let's talk about component states, because we have just been working in the design view of XD. There is a prototype view to make your document interactive. And then, of course, there's a way to share your elements. So let's talk about wiring up an artboard and talk about wiring up components. I'm going to change from the design view to the prototype view. This is in the top left corner on the row where my home icon is. So I'm in the design mode. I can change to prototype mode. Notice once again, the tool changes. I only need either a selection tool or a zoom tool. I can, of course, still see my assets panel, my layers panel, or access plugins if I need to. And remember, everything again is context aware. So with nothing selected, my interactions panel is grayed out. But the moment I select an artboard or an object, I'm going to have options here. So let's zoom in so we can take a look at what we have. And I'm going to select this button. And notice that there's a wire that I can drag away from this button. And if I just drag it into space and let go, nothing happens. But I could take that button and drag it to another artboard. And it simply says that when I select this button and trigger it, it'll go to this artboard. With that button selected with the wire having been dragged to the location, if I look at my interactions panel, it says, first and foremost, what triggers that interaction? Are you going to tap the button? Do you drag that object? Are you actually using your keyboard because you're doing the controls from a laptop or a desktop? Is this a game simulation? Do you have an Xbox or a PlayStation controller? You want to control it with that. And then do you want it to be a voice interaction? I'm going to keep this simple. I'm going to make it a tap, and it's just going to transition to that artboard. If I want to see what it looks like, remember again, we have that desktop preview. And if you happen to be working in 2 monitors, right, then I could always leave this preview open in my second monitor all day, every day. When I tap the button, I know it works. I can play it again and again. Start on my home screen, it resets. Tap the button, I know it works. You saw it do a dissolve from screen to screen. Maybe I don't want it to do a dissolve. I'll select that wire. I'll change the type of animation from dissolve to slide left. I can come back to my desktop preview. I don't need to refresh. tap the button, and that's what the slide looks like. So I get instant feedback by leaving the preview window open. I can be wiring, making changes, and see when things work or don't work simply by selecting the proper artboard and starting off. I want to update this particular artboard, or this button, I should say, so that instead of going to this artboard, it runs through a quick tutorial set. And these artboards should now transition one to the other, but I don't want to tap on anything. It's basically outlining and highlighting the icons for navigation. So I select the artboard name, I drag that wire to the next artboard, but I don't want to tap on anything. When I'm selecting the overall artboard, I can do a timed transition. So I'm going to make this move very fast, and it's just going to go to the next artboard. And I can now select each artboard one by one, drag a wire. XD remembers the last interaction I made, so it knows it's timed, it knows it goes to the next artboard. It takes very short order to select these, wire these up. It takes longer to talk about it than to actually do it. And then I can test it by using my preview, tap the button, and it does exactly what I expect, except it's using the wrong type of interaction. And that's okay. I can select the first one, and I can say I didn't want that to be a push. I wanted it to be a dissolve. Right? Very easy to update and change. And remember, it remembered what I did. So had I selected dissolve the first time, it would have chosen dissolve before. So again, select the button, give it a click, and now it actually does what I expect. You may have seen that there was a skip button there, but the skip button was only on one page. It's right here. I want that to be on all of my pages. So first, let me wire it. Drag the wire where I want it to go, copy it, and then let's save some time by selecting all of the other artboards and simply doing a paste. Not only did it paste the button, it pasted all of the interactions because they're all going to the same place. So now when I do my preview, click the button, I see that the skip is there. I can click it. It goes right where I want it to go. So let's talk about components and interactivity, because with components, I can make more granular interactions because the components can have states. I shared a resource at the top of the hour. You can download this on your own later today. This is the States UI kit provided by Howard Pinsky. Gives you some instructions, and you can see, I'll select one of these artboards. You can have really cool animated interactions. And these are done with component states. So let me break this down and show you how these elements are created. I'm going to zoom in on this component. It is the master component, again, because it has the solid green diamond in the left corner. It also tells me to the right in my properties panel, it is the master component. But now we're going to talk about component states. Up to this point, I have created components for you. I have shown you component instances, but we have not used component states for interactivity. This particular component is in the default state. You'll see that it has a filled state. And if I select that, it is this filled color. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. This is now a basic component. If I want to add a new state, it is as simple as clicking the plus symbol. And notice the first time you click the plus symbol, it has two options. Do you want to make a new state, which is custom, or a hover state? So the hover states are for keyboards. If this is intended for a web browser on a desktop and you want the mouse hover state, you can add that. So let's go ahead and put that in. And I'll just leave it with the default name of hover state. And now as I toggle back and forth between the default and the hover state here in the top right, you can see they're the same. So the first thing for creating interactive states is selecting the proper state. So I want to select the hover state and I'll make my change. I want the fill. Actually, I don't want a fill. I'm going to put a border. So I'm going to turn the border on. And I'm going to turn the fill off. So now my default state and then my hover state. But when it's actually clicked and changed, I want it to be solid again. I'm going to change the red a little bit. Okay, so let's add a new state. This will be the active state. So my default state, the hover, my active state. Okay, I'm going to put the fill back in. I'm going to turn the border off. I'm going to change the color to be a lighter shade of red. So here are my three states. So now I need to wire it because it is not interactive. If I come over to my prototype, you can see by default, here's the object, there's the wire. Look at the little lightning symbol. That indicates that the hover state is already ready to go. I don't have to do anything. And in fact, if I show you the preview of that, it's right here. And if I hover over it, it auto animates. I didn't have to do anything. The hover state is automatically wired. So I want to wire the active state. Okay, the hover state's already there. Okay, it's already wired to go. I'm going to click the plus symbol. It's now my second wire. What's the trigger? It's a tap. What's the state? Hey, it's going to be the default state because that's where I'm starting. Hey, it's going to be my tap interaction. It's going to be my tap trigger. What is it going to do? It's going to auto animate and it's going to go to the active state. So I'm going to repeat that. So once again, we start with the default state. I clicked on the wire, but I didn't drag it anywhere. I said when I'm in the default state and my interaction is a tap and the trigger is also a tap, you're going to auto animate to the active state. If we want to preview that, here's the hover because I'm using a mouse. Here's a tap now to that active state. So I can use my components to create all kinds of triggers that otherwise would not be available. And these are simply components that have multiple states. So again, I'm going to zoom out and just show you some more of these. And again, you have access to these UI kits to play with. Here is my search component. This is the default state. Look at the expanded state. It simply replaces the magnifying icon with a larger rectangle and then a search text box. And then it auto animates between the two. Here was the fly up menu. This is the default state And again, I'm going over to the right, clicking on the expanded state, and those extra icons come into view. And when we look at the auto animation, I click on it and they come into view. I click it again, they go away. If I show you how it's wired, we'll zoom so you can see it better. It has a hover, but if I select the wire, you can see there's my tap trigger, there's my auto animation, and then the destination is the expanded state. It's as simple as that. So a couple other things to point out, and then I'm going to make sure I put the resources back up on the page for you. Wanted to talk very quickly about voice interactions. Okay, they're super simple. I have shown you how to wire a button or wire a component to make it triggered via a tap. Okay, if we take a look at this example, there are taps here. If I tap the burger, it shows all the ingredients. I can drag off the ingredients I don't want. I can tap the burger and then it closes. This particular prototype also has a voice component, okay, or a voice interaction. If I hold the space bar, I can simply say the voice command, no cheese, no lettuce, burger your way. To actually make that work, you might be saying, oh my gosh, that's got to be really difficult. No, it is not. Because if I go back to the prototype view, the first thing that you'll see is if I tap the artboard, there's an auto animation to go to the next artboard called toppings. And here, if I select that cheese object, it has an interaction called drag, so I could drag it off the screen. It auto animates and then goes to the next artboard. And you may notice, I'll zoom closer so that everyone can see, there's a wire that apparently goes to nothing. And this nothing is simply a white box. Okay? You need an object. And I just chose a white box. And notice that with the white box selected, it has a wire. And if I look at the wire, the trigger is voice. And then I typed the command, which was no cheese. I could have said hamburger. I could have said, yes, you type the voice command that you want to trigger the interaction. Once again, I said auto animate so that it could transition to the next artboard. You'll see over here, I have the same thing. This is a voice wire. I just simply said voice. And then I said the command I want and where it needs to go. When you're doing the desktop preview on your laptop desktop, you need to hold down the space bar so that the voice commands will work. Keep in mind, you can use your device. You can take any prototype that you've built. We have an XD preview app for iOS and Android. You can side load your prototype via USB to your device, which means you can walk around with it and you can demo by tapping on your prototype or even using the voice commands on your prototype. The last thing that I'll mention here as we come to a close is the new co-editing. Okay? So I need to be working with cloud documents. You'll see it gave me this message. This document is local on my hard drive. I need a cloud document. So what exactly does that mean? Well, let me make a new document.
Hi, AJ. Sorry to interrupt the flow. Just want to let you know that we're coming up on the hour. There's
Okay.
only 2 minutes left. And we want to do the giveaway and the, I don't think we'll have much time for Q&A, unfortunately, but I can send you the questions after.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So just real quick, so let me just talk about Cloud Document. This is Untitled. I'll give it a name. It's got an icon next to it to let me know it's a Cloud document. So if I hit the plus symbol, I can invite people to this document. Simply put in their email address, and if they have XD, then they can collaborate on this document with you in real time because it's cloud-based. So one person, 100 people, you can all open the XD document at the same time. You can all be making modifications at the same time. You'll see everybody who's in the document live, and all of their changes are represented with a different color. So I'm represented right now in blue. If I was collaborating with a coworker, they might be red or green or yellow, etc., and we can all be working in real time. So a couple things to keep in mind with the co-editing. You want to make sure that everyone is working in the same version of XD. So make sure before you invite everyone out, or as you're working in the co-editing environment, make sure that everyone is in the same version of XD, right? As such, a best practice I recommend is to have an offline local backup copy of your XD document. I have run into minor issues where somebody updates before everybody else, and then you have to wait for everyone to update so the document will sync to everyone. I'm going to go ahead and bring back up my slide. I know we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to have to jump off stage here in a second. I feel the virtual hook being pulled. Again, I want to thank everyone for their time. Yeah, so I want to thank everyone for their time. Again, my name's AJ Wood. Feel free to grab all those resources. Jesse's going to shoot me the questions, and as an added resource for you folks, I will be sure to answer the questions online and then share them with everyone via social media. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Hey, quick question for you. Are you available to stick around at all in this event for a few minutes?
Yeah, I could jump into a session room if you want to make a session room.
Propose is that Peter sets up an Adobe session real quick in the background, and I'll transition on the stage to the next speakers. But Peter, if you can go ahead and set up a session, people can jump over there, and I will sort of cut and paste, or I'll send Peter the questions that I collected for you, and he can pop them into the chat of the session over there, and then you can take some time to to speak to people directly, like in a Zoom call, if that's okay with you. Yeah. I actually, let me just double check. I think I've got at least 30 minutes, so I'm happy to hang out for the next half hour till 10:30 and talk to people and take questions. So on the fly, Peter, let's go ahead and create an Adobe session. Probably should have done that, and but we're learning. And thanks so much, AJ. It was awesome. It was an incredible tour. There's some really hot features in there. I saw in the chat a lot of people are super excited about that stuff. So awesome. Thanks for this very much. Appreciate it. Well, I'll see everyone for the next 30 minutes, and thank you again for having me. Really appreciate it. Cheers.